In the small town of Maplewood, where faith was the backbone of everyday life, one man's world came crashing down. Pastor Elijah King, a beloved figure in the community, seemed to have it all: a devoted family, a thriving church, and a reputation as a man of unwavering morality. But beneath the surface, secrets festered, waiting to unravel everything he held dear. It began with a simple question, a routine school project that would unearth a truth so shocking it would change lives forever. Now, blood stains mar the floor of the church basement, and an open Bible lies soaked in crimson. As Elijah stares at the crucifix, tears streaming down his face, you can feel the weight of his shattered faith. What drove him to this point? How did a man known for preaching forgiveness become capable of such violence? Tonight, we uncover the dark journey of Pastor Elijah King. Subscribe to Vic's True Crime Stories for more gripping tales of betrayal and redemption. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. This is just the beginning. The sun rose over Maplewood on Easter Sunday, casting golden light through the stained glass windows of the community church. Pastor Elijah King stood at the pulpit, his voice resonating with conviction as he spoke about forgiveness and redemption. "We are all sinners," he declared, "but it is through grace that we find our way back to one another." The congregation sat in rapt attention, their faces filled with admiration and respect. Among them was Naomi, her smile bright as she watched her husband deliver yet another powerful sermon. This was a man who had touched countless lives, a beacon of hope for those seeking solace. But there were moments before this, moments captured in time like photographs. A flashback takes us to their wedding day, where Elijah and Naomi exchanged vows under a canopy of flowers. Their eyes locked, brimming with love and promise. Back then, nothing seemed impossible. They danced together as friends and family cheered around them, believing they were witnessing the start of something extraordinary. And for years, it was. The Kings became the epitome of perfection in Maplewood, a couple devoted not only to each other but also to their faith. A week later, the family gathered for dinner at their home. Laughter filled the air as Abigail, the eldest daughter, shared details about her school project. "It's a genealogy assignment," she explained excitedly. "I need to trace our family roots using DNA testing." The room fell silent for a moment. Henry cleared his throat, his fork pausing mid-air. There was an uneasiness that settled over the table, unseen but palpable. Elijah looked up from his plate, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Across from him, Naomi avoided his gaze, her hands resting nervously in her lap. 4 years, the King family appeared perfect, a model of Christian virtue. They attended church every Sunday, volunteered tirelessly, and lived by the principles they preached. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were forming, subtle fissures that no one could see. Secrets have a way of doing that, gnawing away at the edges until they threaten to consume everything whole. That evening, as the family finished their meal, the tension lingered long after the dishes were cleared. It wasn't just Abigail's innocent curiosity. It was the fear of what might be uncovered if the truth came to light. Henry excused himself early, citing work commitments, but his hurried departure did little to ease the heaviness in the room. Elijah turned to Naomi, searching her face for answers she couldn't give. Not yet. She smiled weakly, trying to mask her guilt, but the weight of her secret pressed heavily on her shoulders. As the night drew to a close, the Kings retired to their respective rooms, unaware of how drastically their lives were about to change. Beneath the veneer of perfection lay a storm brewing, ready to expose the fragile foundations upon which their world rested. And so, the stage was set. What began as an ordinary family gathering would soon spiral into a tale of betrayal and heartbreak, unraveling the very fabric of the life they had built together. For now, though, the facade remained intact, holding steady against the winds of change. But the cracks were there, growing wider with each passing day, waiting for the inevitable moment when they would shatter completely. The air in Maplewood was thick with secrets, simmering beneath the surface like an unspoken storm waiting to unleash its fury. On May 7th, Abigail sat alone in her bedroom, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope containing the results of her genealogy project, a simple assignment that would unravel the darkest truths of her family's history. As she read the words on the page, her breath caught in her throat. The DNA test confirmed what she had suspected but dared not voice aloud. Henry, her grandfather, was the biological father of both her and Sophie. Shock waves rippled through her mind as she tried to process the implications. This wasn't just about biology. This was about betrayal, manipulation, and years of carefully concealed lies. Her heart pounding, Abigail sought out Naomi, hoping for answers that might make sense of the chaos swirling inside her. She found her mother in the kitchen, quietly washing dishes as if trying to scrub away the weight of the world. "Mom," Abigail began hesitantly, her voice trembling, "I got the results from my DNA test." Naomi froze mid-motion, the dish slipping from her grasp and shattering on the floor. For a moment, neither woman moved, the sound of breaking porcelain echoing through the room like a gunshot. Then, with tears streaming down her face, Naomi collapsed onto a nearby chair, her composure crumbling under the weight of years of silence. "I'm so sorry, Abigail," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know how else to protect you, or your sisters." And with those words, the floodgates opened. Naomi confessed everything: the years of abuse, the threats, the fear that had kept her trapped in a cycle of silence. Each word felt like a knife slicing into her soul, but there was also a strange sense of release, as though shedding the burden of secrecy might finally allow her to breathe. In flashes of memory, the past came alive. There was young Naomi standing in the church basement after a late-night meeting, cornered by Henry. "Haven't I always taken care of you, Naomi?" he asked, his tone authoritative yet laced with menace. "You know what happens when people talk too much. Do you really want to risk everything we've built here?" Another memory showed Henry at the dinner table, dismissing Naomi's concerns about finances with a condescending wave of his hand. "Women shouldn't worry their pretty little heads about such things," he said, ensuring she felt powerless even in her own home. These moments painted a chilling portrait of a man who wielded his position of authority like a weapon, coercing Naomi into submission through fear and intimidation. By May 14th, the secret could no longer remain hidden. That evening, Elijah returned home to find Naomi sitting on the edge of their bed, her shoulders slumped, her face etched with exhaustion. He approached her cautiously, sensing something was deeply wrong. "Naomi," he said softly, his voice tinged with concern, "what's going on? You've been distant lately." Naomi looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak, her voice trembling. "Elijah, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her words catching in her throat. "I didn't know what else to do. He threatened me. Threatened our children." Elijah froze, his entire body going rigid as the reality of her words sank in. "What are you talking about?" His voice was steady, though inside, turmoil raged. Naomi took another deep breath, bracing herself for the confession she had buried for so many years. "It's Henry," she said, her voice cracking. "All these years, he forced himself on me. Abigail and Sophie, they're his daughters, not yours." Time seemed to stop as Elijah processed her words. Disbelief warred with fury within him, each emotion clawing for dominance. His chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. How could the man he admired, the one he called father, have done such a thing? And how could Naomi, the woman he loved more than anything, have allowed it to continue without telling him? "How could you let this happen?" he demanded, his voice rising despite his attempts to control it. "How could you keep this from me?" "I was scared," Naomi cried, her voice breaking. "He made me believe there was no way out. He told me if I spoke up, he'd hurt us, all of us. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could protect you and the kids. But now. Her voice trailed off, the weight of her confession too much to bear. Elijah paced the room, his mind racing. Questions swirled in his head like a maelstrom. Questions about trust, loyalty, and the very foundation of their marriage. Betrayal cut deep, slicing through the bonds of trust they had built over 2 decades of life together. Yet amidst the rage, there was also pain, aching, raw pain that threatened to consume him whole. In the quiet hours of the morning, Elijah finally spoke again. "What do we do now?" His voice was barely above a whisper, heavy with resignation. Naomi shook her head, unable to answer. The question hung between them, unanswered and unanswerable, for now. Their lives had changed irrevocably, and the road ahead promised only uncertainty and heartache. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The foundation of their world had cracked, and the pieces were beginning to fall. As dawn broke over Maplewood, casting golden light through the windows of their home, Elijah stared at the crucifix hanging on the wall, wondering if even God could forgive the sins that had torn his family apart. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and share it with friends who love true crime. Let's keep the conversation going. The days leading up to June 3rd were a relentless storm inside Elijah's mind, a tempest of anger, confusion, and betrayal that refused to subside. How could he have been so blind? How could the man he called father, the one he admired and respected above all others, have betrayed him in such a monstrous way? That evening, Elijah confronted Henry in the dimly lit study of their home, a place where countless family gatherings had once filled the air with laughter and warmth. Now, it was suffused with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The faint sound of creaking floorboards echoed as Elijah stepped closer to his father, each step deliberate, measured. Every breath seemed heavier, every second stretched out like an eternity. "You knew," Elijah began, his voice low but laced with venom. "You knew what you were doing all these years, didn't you?" Henry sat across from him, his usual air of authority faltering under the intensity of Elijah's gaze. For a moment, there was silence. Only the sound of heavy breathing broke through the stillness. "I don't know what you're talking about," Henry replied, attempting to play innocent, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. But Elijah wasn't fooled. He leaned forward, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "You took everything from me, the trust one had in you, the love I shared with Naomi, even my own children. You destroyed us, Henry." Henry tried to regain control, his manipulative nature resurfacing despite the situation. "It wasn't just me," he said, his tone shifting to one of accusation. "Naomi let this happen. She should have stopped it." His words hit Elijah like a punch to the gut, fueling the fire burning within him. The room seemed to shrink around them, every breath heavier than the last. Slow-motion images flashed through Elijah's mind, his clenched fists, the veins bulging on his neck, the raw fury etched into his face. Elijah's voice rose, echoing off the walls of the study. "You think blaming her makes it better? You think pushing the guilt onto someone else absolves you of your sins? You're nothing but a predator, Henry, a parasite who thrived on fear and manipulation." Each word was a dagger, slicing through the fragile facade Henry had maintained for so long. Henry's face twisted with desperation. "This isn't about me, Elijah. It's about Naomi. She chose not to tell you. She chose to stay silent. Don't act like you're the only one who suffered here." Elijah froze, the weight of Henry's words sinking in. Was Naomi truly complicit? Or was she, too, a victim caught in the web of Henry's cruelty? Doubt crept into his mind, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. But before he could process the thought, Henry continued, his voice dripping with malice. "She used you, Elijah. She played you for a fool while she let me do whatever I wanted. Don't act like you're the only one who suffered here." The room fell silent, the tension crackling like electricity in the air. Elijah stared at Henry, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. In that moment, something inside him snapped. All the pain, the betrayal, the shattered illusions, it all converged into a single, overwhelming force. By July 15th, Elijah's world had unraveled completely. The betrayal by those he trusted most gnawed at him day and night, eating away at his sanity. That evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows over the house, Elijah made his decision. Betrayal can drive even the most righteous to extremes, and for Elijah King, the line between justice and revenge blurred irreparably that night. He found Naomi first, her presence a reminder of the choices she had, or hadn't, made. In his mind, she had willingly participated in the betrayal, allowing Henry to destroy their family. Her silence had been deafening, her complicity unbearable. As he stood before her, his heart pounded with a mix of sorrow and fury. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear, but also tinged with regret. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, let me explain." But there was no explaining now. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably broken. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with sorrow, Elijah acted. The act itself felt surreal, as if he were watching someone else commit the unthinkable. In that moment, he became both judge and executioner, carrying out a sentence born of pain and despair. Next came Henry, the man who had built his life on deception and manipulation. As Elijah stood over him, the weight of years of pain and anger surged through him. This was more than revenge. It was a symbolic destruction of the man who had shattered his life. Each blow delivered carried the force of a lifetime of hurt, each strike a cry for the innocents lost. Henry's pleas fell on deaf ears. Elijah was beyond reason, consumed by a rage that obliterated any semblance of mercy. As the night wore on, Elijah cleaned up the crime scene methodically, his movements mechanical, almost robotic. Flashbacks interrupted his actions. Happier moments with his family played out in his mind like ghosts haunting him. There was Naomi laughing during one of their rare vacations, Abigail's first communion, EJ helping him prepare for Sunday services, Sophie's sweet voice singing hymns. These memories contrasted sharply with the violence surrounding him, reminding him of what he had lost forever. The weight of his actions settled over him like a shroud, but there was no turning back now. What had begun as a quest for truth had spiraled into something far darker, leaving behind only devastation and regret. Betrayal had driven him to extremes unimaginable just months before, blurring the lines between right and wrong until they disappeared entirely. As dawn approached, Elijah stared at his blood-stained hands, knowing his life, and the lives of those around him, would never be the same again. The sins of betrayal had claimed their price, and the cost was greater than anyone could have foreseen. In the quiet hours before sunrise, he realized the full weight of what he had done. Justice or revenge? It mattered little now. The family he had loved, the faith he had cherished, the future he had envisioned, all were gone, replaced by a void that would haunt him for the rest of his days. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and share it with friends who love true crime. Let's keep the conversation going. The days following the tragedy were a blur of chaos and confusion for Maplewood. On August 1, 2023, Elijah King calmly surrendered to the police, his demeanor strikingly composed despite the gravity of his actions. Standing outside the church where he had once preached forgiveness and redemption, Elijah spoke in a steady voice, claiming that his actions were divinely guided. "I did what God asked me to do," he stated without hesitation, his words sending shockwaves through the community. The contrast between his calm exterior and the brutality of his crimes left everyone stunned. How could the man who had once been a beacon of hope now stand accused of such unspeakable acts? As news of Elijah's surrender spread, the media frenzy began. Reporters swarmed Maplewood, eager to capture every detail of the unfolding drama. News clips aired across the nation, showing interviews with congregants who expressed disbelief at the transformation of their beloved pastor. "This doesn't sound like the man I knew," one woman said, her voice trembling. Another man added, "Elijah was always so kind, so compassionate. Something must have snapped inside him." Yet not everyone condemned him outright. Some defended Elijah as a victim-turned-avenger, arguing that Henry's abuse justified his violent response. These conflicting perspectives ignited fierce debates within the community, dividing friends and families alike. By September 15, 2023, the trial began, drawing national attention. Inside the courtroom, tensions ran high as conflicting testimonies unfolded. Abigail took the stand first, her voice steady but tinged with emotion as she recounted discovering the DNA test results. "When I saw the paper, my whole world collapsed," she testified. "I couldn't believe what it meant, that everything we thought we knew about our family was a lie." Her testimony painted a vivid picture of the betrayal that had driven Elijah to the brink. Next came E.J., who struggled to reconcile his admiration for his father with the reality of his crimes resonated deeply with the jury. "Growing up, Dad was my hero," he admitted, his voice breaking. "He taught me about faith, about doing the right thing. But now, how can I look at him and still see that person?" His words highlighted the complexity of familial loyalty and the pain of shattered illusions. As the trial progressed, evidence mounted against Elijah, yet his unwavering belief in divine guidance remained unshaken. On October 10, 2023, the verdict was delivered: life in prison without parole. In his final statement, Elijah stood before the court, his expression calm but resolute. "I regret nothing," he declared, his voice firm. "God commanded me to act, and I obeyed. If you cannot understand that, then perhaps your faith is weaker than mine." His lack of remorse sent ripples through the courtroom, leaving many unsettled. For some, it confirmed their belief that Elijah had crossed an unforgivable line. Others saw it as a tragic testament to the power of conviction, even when misguided. As the gavel fell, signaling the end of the trial, the weight of the decision settled over the room. Justice had been served, or so it seemed, but the scars left behind would take years to heal. In the aftermath, the children of the King family faced their own battles. Placed in separate foster homes, they struggled to come to terms with the loss of their parents and the trauma of what had happened. Abigail threw herself into schoolwork, using her intelligence as a shield against the pain. E.J. withdrew into himself, grappling with conflicting feelings of anger and love toward his father. And Sophie, the youngest, clung to memories of happier times, seeking solace in the fragments of her childhood that remained intact. For the town of Maplewood, the case of Elijah King became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the dangers of unchecked emotions. It sparked broader discussions about consent, abuse, and the fine line between justice and revenge. Though the trial may have ended, the questions it raised lingered long after the headlines faded. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and share it with friends who love true crime. Let's keep the conversation going. Want to hear more stories like this? Subscribe to Vic's True Crime Stories now. And leave a comment below. What did you think of Elijah's actions? Was he a victim driven to extremes, or a perpetrator who went too far? Your thoughts matter. In the quiet aftermath of tragedy, the lives of Abigail, E.J., and Sophie began their own separate journeys. On November 1, 2023, Abigail, ever the thinker, carried a heavy burden of survivor's guilt. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had somehow failed her parents, that if only she hadn't pursued the DNA test, none of this would have happened. Her mind was a whirlwind of what-ifs, but she channeled her pain into academics, throwing herself into schoolwork as a way to escape the suffocating reality. E.J., meanwhile, wrestled with conflicting emotions about his father. The man he once admired as a hero now stood convicted of unspeakable crimes. How could he reconcile the loving pastor who taught him about faith and morality with the vengeful figure who had taken lives? These questions haunted him day and night, leaving him withdrawn and introspective. He often found himself staring at old photos of his family, searching for answers in the faces of those who had been torn apart. Sophie, the youngest, sought solace in simpler things. Too young to fully grasp the complexities of her parents' actions, she clung to memories of happier times. Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, and lazy afternoons spent playing in the backyard. For her, healing meant piecing together the fractured remnants of her childhood and finding ways to hold on to the love that still lingered in her heart, even amidst the chaos. The sins of one generation often ripple through the next. For the King children, the road to healing will be long and fraught with challenges. They must navigate not only the loss of their parents but also the trauma of secrets uncovered and truths too painful to bear. Yet perhaps in time, they'll find a way to rebuild their lives, and their faith, not just in God, but in themselves and each other. Thanks for watching Vic's True Crime Stories. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with anyone who loves thought-provoking true crime narratives. What do you think? Was Elijah justified in his actions? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts matter.